The Cave, credited to Arch Feared. Part 1. There were originally 9 of us scheduled for the spelunking expedition, but Murphy's Law dictated that 2 of the group had to pull out due to various issues. It was a disappointment having fewer members to share in the experience, but then again, there were benefits. Less logistical problems, more space, and so on. I personally wasn't affected by it. While most of us were all close friends, I hadn't known these 2 very well. Our rendezvous was the cave entrance at the crack of dawn. I was the first one there. As usual, those who often know me remark at my attention to punctuality. Slowly the rest of the group arrived, parking their cars and unloading the equipment that we had organized between us. As the expedition leader, I had the emergency provisions on me. First aid kit, flare gun, GPS locator. It seems quite odd that a flare gun would be taken into an underground location, but I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. We assembled at the cave's entrance. There was Jason, Alex, Karen, Samantha, Vincent, Ashley, and of course myself. Alex and I were experienced spelunkers, while the rest had varying skill levels. Moderate were Karen, Vincent, and Samantha. Poor, Jason, and a first-timer, Ashley. Normally, it was against my instinct to take a first-timer into an unexplored cave, and in such large group, but he had promised to obey every command I gave him, and he agreed to carry the most cumbersome equipment on the safe parts of the track. The cave loomed in front of us. It was typically dark and rather foreboding. Not for the first time, I wondered why it was, according to every available record of local geological sites, unexplored. Perhaps it was the isolated location, or the fact that until recently there had been no way for vehicles to access it through the surrounding forest. "Are you sure it's all right?" Ashley nervously asked, shifting from foot to foot. His earlier bravado had deserted him. "Yes. You can't change your mind once we're in, so decide now," I said flatly, turning around without waiting for an answer. He'd make his own mind up without any further input from me. The rest of the group followed me. After a few minutes of apparent indecision, Ashley hurried in after the rest of us. Soon, the darkness swallowed us whole. Inside the cave was quite larger than it appeared. It proceeded inwards for about 200 meters and then sloped down quite quickly. As per usual, I ordered the group members to buddy up, a system in which the group divided into pairs and threes and were responsible for keeping together. Ashley and I were partners, given that I was the most experienced and that he was the least. It wasn't as fun spelunking when you had to care for somebody else, but it was a necessary evil. Besides, he was a quick learner. Soon, the sunlight from the cave's mouth faded. "Flares out, everybody," I ordered. One by one, the expedition members cracked their flares. As per local guidelines, each member carried 2 packs of 30 handheld flares. It may have been excessive, but the flares weren't very strong and only provided enough light for the immediate area around the user. I took a glow stick from my pack and wedged it into the rock beside me. Only I carried these, and they were quite stronger than the flares, able to last up to 12 hours with diminishing light after 8. I would use them to mark our trail back up. Slowly, we continued down. The handheld flares lasted for 15 minutes on average, and soon we reached an edge. I ordered the group to stop 5 feet from the precipice, where the ground leveled out. As you may have noticed, I am a stickler for safety measures, but not without good reason. I didn't want a death on my hands. "Ashley, crack a flare and throw it down," I said, watching to see how he did it. Ashley withdrew a flare from his backpack and lit it. Then, without moving, he tossed it forward down the hole. I nodded in approval. He hadn't moved forward from the 5-meter guideline. I crept forward to the precipice and looked into the abyss. Then, I saw it. Descending into darkness barely half a meter from the cliff's edge was what appeared to be a staircase. Part 2. The light of the flare made one thing quite clear. It wasn't a man-made staircase. At least it didn't look like one. It appeared to be hewn out of a descending rock, meaning that the original cliff would have extended further into the cave. The stairs were rough and uneven, but it was close enough for government work, as the saying goes. "What is it?" one of the group members asked from behind me. "Looks like a natural staircase of sorts," I answered, distracted. I withdrew another glow stick from my bag and planted it at the top of the stairs. "Let's go." We descended cautiously, for caves are notoriously deceptive. Ahead of me, the darkness grew thicker. It seemed palpable, almost physical. As if my thoughts were true, the flares we held seemed to diminish in the face of the abyss. After 50 or so steps, I reached the bottom. That's when I heard the crack. It sounded like a gunshot, loud and sharp. I spun at the foot of the stairs. Behind me, Jason was tumbling down at the last few steps, straight towards me. I spun out of the way and he crashed onto the floor, moaning in agony. The rest of the group hurried towards me, concerned as I bent to inspect the injury. It was obvious. His ankle was twisted at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Jason's face had rapidly lost color. "Karen, Vincent, grab him by the arms. Careful," I said quietly, unwilling to exasperate the situation by panicking. They picked him up slowly, his ankle dangling grotesquely beneath him. Something glinted under the crimson light of the flares. I knew it was his bone. I reached into my pack, taking out 2 small batons and a white bandage. "This is gonna hurt," I warned. The caution was wasted on Jason anyways. He was half unconscious. I grabbed his ankle and twisted. His ankle cracked again. That roused Jason from his stupor. He screamed piercingly, loud enough to hurt my ears. Quickly, trying not to prolong his agony, I wound the bandages around the batons which braced either side of his leg. The screaming stopped, but not because of the pain had faded. He was unconscious. "Take him up to the entrance of the cave and go to the hospital. If he wakes, give him these painkillers." I told his helpers, and Karen and Vincent nodded and began the arduous climb up to the surface, holding their unconscious ward. "Shouldn't we go with him? I mean, his ankle was," Ashley began, but I cut him off. "No, we came this far and we're not going to stop now. I want to investigate this cave to the end. Remember, I told you that you couldn't change your mind," I said sharply, taking out my anger at letting the accident happen under my leadership on him. Ashley, known as Ash to his friends, but I never used that, fell silent. I felt a fleeting sense of guilt at my attitude. I brushed it off and spun around. Already Jason and the others were out of view. Around the group, the darkness surrounded us like a malevolent entity. The landing that we were on led out further into the cave for quite a while, and we proceeded incident-free, thankfully. I marked our progress with the glow sticks at various intervals. Strangely, like the flares, they gave off less light the deeper we progressed. It began to unnerve me, and I could tell that the others noticed it too. Alex and Samantha, who were incidentally brother and sister, fell a few steps behind us. Ashley to my right was silent. Finally, as the flares grew even dimmer, I saw something in the wall to my right. I called the diminished group over and cracked a few new flares to provide extra light. It appeared to be some sort of carving in the wall. I studied it carefully. The scene depicted a few humanoid forms on the ground. A few scratches of red seemed to indicate wounds. Various pillars around them rose to the roof of the cavern. But that wasn't nearly the worst part. In front of the people, the victims, I now corrected myself, was a large figure. It may have been detailed in the past, but only the outline remained. The body was scratched out. It was a disturbing scene. Then I looked beneath the scene and my eyes widened. It had a message. Part 3. The strange thing about the message was that it was in English. The carving looked entirely authentic, meaning that a caveman, if you pardon the pun, had created it. I found it impossible that the same person could have scrawled the 5 words below the picture. Behind me, Alex read it out loud. The Jackal in the cave. How strange, he said. Indeed, that was the message, written entirely in capitals. I dismissed the painting and turned back to the main path. It was obviously a hoax. There was no way a caveman could have written in any script, let alone in English. Probably just some kid mucking around in days long past. But it still made me uneasy, regardless of what I assumed it to be. If it was a hoax, then why does it look so freaking authentic? Eventually, the 4 of us had our fill of the Jackal in the cave, and after Ashley had snapped a photo of it for a keepsake, we continued in the cave. I was forced to light 2 flares off at a time now, to ward off the choking darkness. The diminishing effects of the flares puzzled me. In all my time spelunking, I had never encountered anything like it. I wondered whether it was a defective bunch or some other reason. It had to have a logical, rational reason. Behind me, Alex and Samantha were still locked in conversation. I picked up snatches of the heated debate as they walked. They, like me, were still pondering the origin of the admittedly ominous cave drawing. I wish they dropped it already, or at least quieted down. I looked to my right, saw nothing but a sloping cave wall, and looked away, back to the trail. I froze and turned. There among the rock I had just glanced at was another carving. I felt sick as I hurried over to it. The red glow of the flares flickered on the walls, dancing over the picture, making it look demonic under the sparse light. It depicted a scene much like the last, except there were only 2 bodies on the floor. The third was mid-air, seemingly held by an appendage, not quite an arm, not quite a tentacle, from the supposed Jackal. The pillars around the scene appeared again, except with small, indistinct etchings on them. Like before, only the faint outline of the Jackal appeared, the rest of it having been scribbled out or scratched. I couldn't tell which. Underneath it was another 5-word message, one that I read quickly and immediately wished I hadn't. Go back. The Jackal waits, it said. I turned from the carving as the others moved in to get a good look at it and try not to panic. The air felt thin and dry, much like the air in the Andes. I'd gone climb there a few years ago and terrible things had happened, which explained my preference for underground rocks as opposed to aerial ones. But that's a story for another day, and another time. Around me the darkness was thick. I could no longer see without the flares in aid. Suddenly, irrationally, I knew if I stayed in this underground labyrinth for much longer, I would lose my sanity. But that was the mind of an irrational man talking. I leaned against the opposing wall, breathing deeply and slowly to regulate my rapid heartbeat. Spots danced in front of my eyes momentarily as I oxygenated my blood rapidly. Slowly the panic faded to be replaced by a sense of calm. I didn't get overworked often, but when I did, I tend to edge towards hysteria. Taking one last deep breath, I straightened and looked around. That's when I realized that Ashley was gone. Part 4. Slowly, I stood scanning the passage for any sign of Ashley. Samantha and Alex were still arguing over the cave carving. They were typically argumentative of identical twins. As Alex drew breath to continue his opinion, I stepped between them, holding my hands up in peace. Have either of you seen Ashley? He's gone, I said, stepping back once I saw that they had ceased fighting and listened to what I said. No, they said in unison. I sighed in frustration and looked around the cavern. There was no trace of Ashley anywhere. He couldn't have gone far, not with that massive pack he had strapped to him, Alex said reasonably, possibly sensing the panic that I felt. The entire expedition had had its problems from the start. First the dropouts, then Jason, now this. It was like we were cursed or some other type of superstitious nonsense. I was born a skeptic and proud of it. He could have only gone forward or back, said Samantha, walking forward to the edge of the light and looking around. We should split up and... No, I said resolute. We're not going to split up under any circumstances. If Ashley went back, he'll eventually get out of the cave by himself, so we'll go forward and hope that that stupid dude doesn't do anything reckless, I interjected flatly, turning away from the duo and proceeding into the darkness. After a shared glance, the meaning of which was undecipherable to at least me, they followed, and so we went. As we progressed, I felt the path led downwards. It was a marginal slope, undetected by the naked eye, but I felt myself pushing harder into the rock with each step, thanks to the extra gravity of the descent. It wasn't of any concern to me, such natural formations were common. We proceeded even further into the depths of the cave, calling out Ashley's name as we went. Then, I saw it. It was over to the right, like the others. It was, of course, another carving. I felt sick as I scanned it. The Tyler Jackal had increased in size yet again. The tentacle appendage hybrid was shorter, as if the beast had pulled it back. The previously held corpse was ominously absent from the scene. I tried not to think about what had happened to it. The pillars with carvings on them also appeared. As before, the Jackal had the majority of its details erased, making it a little more than an outline. However, there was details on the edge of the beast this time. I knew the short lines represented skin, apparently leathery and cracked. Then I read the message. It was again 5 words long, and my eyes widened in the flash of shock and fear. "This is your last chance," it read. I stumbled back from the carving in fear, raising my hands in front of me, as if it was alive and coming for me. As I hit the back wall, I saw Alex and Samantha close in to study the carving. They seemed unaffected by the ominous message as I had been. I gasped for breath, winded by the sudden impact of the wall against me. I tried to clear my mind, to cut through the mix of panic and fear I now felt at having read the carving which I no longer thought was the work of pranksters. I turned to my left, hoping to see Ashley. Instead, I saw the gateway. It appeared to be a stone arch, hewn from black granite. It followed the contour of the cave precisely, creating a strange effect. Carvings of various things, symbols, letters, and pictures covered the gateway, which appeared to be seamless, without join or cut. I approached it almost unwillingly, feeling my heart rise in my throat as I stared at the ground immediately before the gateway, and onwards. The walls, floor, and roof of the cave from the gateway onwards were covered in fine, white dust. Alex and Samantha joined me at the edge of the gateway. We were silent, studying the gateway. I looked at the top and saw yet another 5-letter message carved there. "The gateway to the Jackal," read the message. And the heck with it, I thought. Then, I heard the scream. It was Ashley screaming. "We have to get to him," Alex yelled, turning to me. With every fiber of my body, I resisted stepping through the gateway. I knew if we did, terrible things would happen. If I stepped through, I knew sooner or later I would meet the Jackal. But I had to know about Ashley, the carvings, everything. I had to. So with a deep breath and trying to still my hands, I made my choice. Together we stepped through the gateway to Ashley and the dark beast beyond. Part 5. The first change I noticed was the ground. The fine white dust was coated on the entire cave, right past the gateway. I didn't know the origin. It didn't appear to be from any sort of mineral or rock I had encountered before. It was strange, but then, given the nature of the rest of the cave, that almost made it normal. The darkness grew progressively thicker as we advanced. I noticed we were running low on flares, about only 20 each. It was a problem, but not one I was particularly concerned with, considering the current predicament that we were in. Ashley hadn't made any noises besides his original scream. It concerned me far more than if he had kept screaming. There could be a logical reason for him not screaming. Perhaps he ran deeper into the cave. Maybe he was conserving his voice, I thought, but I was throwing up improbable answers to cover my fear. My true thought rose unbidden to my mind. What if whatever made him scream stopped him from doing so again? I felt sick. Ahead of us, not even 100 meters from the gateway, was a crossroads. The first such divide in the otherwise linear path. I had appreciated the lack of divergent paths so far because it meant that we didn't have to divide our group, stunted as it was. Appearing now, as it had, seemed like extraordinarily bad luck on our part. Seemed like that's the key point. Nothing in this godforsaken cave had been left to chance. Lost in my grim thoughts as I was, I didn't notice the object ahead of us until Alex exclaimed and ran towards it. Startled, I looked up. Alex blocked my direct view of it. All I knew of it, apparently, was that it was quite large. I ran towards it. It was Ashley's pack, ripped and torn. Blood covered it and the immediate area in irregular patterns. Beside me, Alex stepped back tentatively, lost for words. Something attacked him, tore the pack right from his back with incredible force. It must have injured him as well, judging by the blood, I said quietly, surprised at how clinical and calm my assessment of the scene had been. That's it. I'm out. I'm going, Alex said, turning away quickly, but not before I saw the fear in his eyes. He was terrified. Samantha nodded in agreement, turning to leave as well. I didn't try to stop either of them. They would be back. You won't get a foot past the gateway, I called to them, certain that it would prevent them from leaving. I turned back to Ashley's pack slowly and began searching through it quickly, taking only a few items. I hesitated when my hand landed on the flare gun, but I took it and kept it in my hand. I knew from experience against various types of wildlife that it made an effective weapon. If I met anything that wasn't Ashley, I would fire without mercy. I stood and chose the right-handed passageway. I didn't feel scared anymore. In fact, I didn't feel a thing. Adrenaline was coursing through my system, leaving no room for fear or anything else. It grew progressively darker. The darkness was thick and cloying. As a lifetime asthma sufferer, it reminded me of the time I needed my inhaler. I knew the flares would be soon useless, regardless of whether they should be effective. Beside me, I noticed scrawling in the dust, apparently of human origin. That, at least, was no mystery. I glanced at each in turn, almost mechanically, knowing that it couldn't be any worse. It appeared that they weren't the first people to stumble into this place. I have seen it, and it blinded me. This is its domain, taller than any human. Suddenly, I stopped. The last was different from the others, in lowercase, and appeared to be freshly written. It cut me. I'm running for my life. Ashley's writing. And then, as if by magic, I heard two things. A scream and a roar. Ashley, the Jackal. They were close. I ran forward. Part 6. I felt, rather than sensed, that I had breached into a massive cavern. To prove my theory, I impulsively punched the air to my right. If I was still in that claustrophobic cave, my hand would have surely been shattered on the wall. As I expected, I hit nothing but the stagnant air of the cave. The flares provided nothing more than a dim glow. I looked at it in horror as the glow faded slowly. The fading light represented my last defense against the virtual darkness of the cave. or cave, as I felt it should be called, and its sole inhabitant. The inhabitant some call the Jackal. The light faded completely. I was alone. The moment I heard the voice. It was flat and terrible and loud. It reverberated around me, seemingly without a source or direction. I spun in the darkness, the glowing, the constricting darkness, and felt my heart in my throat. I knew that if I walked backwards, I would no longer find the passageway that had led me to the lair of the Jackal. Once you entered the central cavern, there's no leaving it. Just like the carvings promised, I thought.
"This is my cave,"
it bellowed. I screamed and ran. It was a futile gesture. The voice boomed around me, terrifying in its alienness and its flat, expressionless quality. The Jackal was not human, nor was it even some revenant or ghost of a forgotten culture. It was something that had no place in the universe and something I wish I could never see. My heart thundered in my chest and my eyes vibrated. I could no longer even control my own body. I am a prisoner in my own body.
"The other one screamed before I took him,"
boomed the Jackal, interrupting my thoughts. "Forget you!" I screamed hysterically into the darkness around me. It was a petty rebellion. I doubted the Jackal even knew what it meant, but I felt better for it, all the same. Around me the darkness coalesced. It's alive, I thought. I tried to stifle a scream as an image popped into my head. Thousands of millions of bugs crawling over me in the darkness, biting, scratching, and running, and was banished moments later by the Jackal's next terrible oration.
"You will remain here forever,"
it howled. I know that voice, I thought vaguely. After the voice came the footsteps. I sensed I could feel both the tremors and hear the footsteps. Hundreds of them around me, pounding the floor in a rapid and terrifying rhythm. Rolling thunder, I thought crazily, and laughed. What little sanity I possessed was rapidly being eroded away by the darkness, millions of bugs, rolling thunder, the Jackal and its influence over the cave, and consequently, those inside it. I doubted if Ashley was still alive, that Samantha and Alex had escaped. I didn't even think that Karen, Vincent, and Jason had escaped alive. Even as I considered this, the Jackal howled again, the flat voice echoing throughout my dark prison.
"They all died, as you will,"
the Jackal roared in its expressionless tone, creating a queer, wavering effect that hurt my ears. My throat burned from the lack of moisture. A headache pounded in my head and my ears throbbed, strangely in time with the footsteps. I'm just rolling thunder, I thought, and laughed crazily. Then, as I considered what the Jackal had said, it can read my thoughts. It was not such a fantastical idea. The Jackal had only ever spoken after I had a thought. A coincidence? I think not, pardon the pun. I considered the mental connection an idea began to form. I stopped running and emptied my thoughts, banishing the sensory manipulation the Jackal used on me. The footsteps around me intensified, but I heard none of it as I shut down my senses and opened my mind. Then, exposed without the cloak of my previous panic thoughts, I felt it. The Jackal's mind. It was a colossal, alien thing, like a structure too gargantuan for the human mind to comprehend. It would dwarf me, swallow my mind whole, and leave me a gibbering wreck if I considered it for too long. It wasn't even natural, let alone human. Thoughts and ideas seemed to be constructed in a fashion that was incomprehensible to the human mind. In a word, the Jackal's presence was dark. As I felt its presence wash over me, I steeled myself and sprung the trap. Instantly before the beast could retreat, I thought of light. A blinding supernova, more light than any human had ever witnessed. A bright inferno of light. I let that mental image expand in my mind and over onto the Jackal's colossal presence. I guessed that such a creature had never seen light. Or if it had spent so long underground, bathed in the darkness which it controlled, such light even as imagined, would do tremendous harm to it, considering that the Jackal's mental abilities far outclassed my own. I was right. The instant the supernova image touched the Jackal's presence, a tremendous shriek filled the chamber, immediately overtaking all the phantom footsteps that had so tormented me. I grinned savagely, despite the pain the high-pitched squeal caused my ears. That at least sounded vaguely human. It felt empowering to know that I had hurt the Jackal, probably badly. I heard rushing noises around me and opened my eyes. And possibly, the virulent darkness was retracting around me. I spun wildly in the grip of the receding darkness. As I moved, I glanced around me. I was in a huge chamber, one that extended far into the distance. I saw columns and pillars and carvings, and realized that this really was the Jackal's feeding ground lair that had been the subject of the ominous cave paintings. I had no time to consider that, however, as the final darkness receded, the cave that was lit by the light that had no source, my mental light, I thought, exposed its only occupant and the occupant's slave. Just like that, I saw them. Ashley, the Jackal. Part 7. I could never truly describe the beast before me. It wasn't because I didn't know the right way to articulate it. I knew exactly what to call it. I simply could not comprehend the Jackal. It was as if I was viewing it from the extremities of my peripheral vision. It was blurry and soft and weak. Weak because it had no hard angles or edges. No matter how hard I looked, how much I stared, the Jackal remained hidden to me. A formless shape hidden under a veil of unreality. The cave paintings, carvings, whatever adjective I attached to them, were truer than I had thought, even after the Jackal had turned out to be real. They depicted a blurry, formless Jackal, and so it was. Yes, I knew exactly what it was. Indistinct. Ashley, however, was not. I looked at him in horror. His body was covered in blood, flesh, and other less identifiable materials. I could count at least 8 visible wounds, and more red lines than I couldn't distinguish from the gore saturated his form. A gaping wound cut across his stomach, revealing intestines, pink and rubbery. Blood flowed from multiple slashes on his arms and legs. He was probably dead, certainly unconscious, but that wasn't the worst of it. His right ear had been torn off clean from his head. Bile rose in my throat as I stared at his prostrate form, horrified. The Jackal had done this to him. As I thought of the beast before me, I realized that the cavern around me was silent. The Jackal's screech, so loud to begin with, had been cut off instantly some moments previous, unlike the gradual decline that was characteristic in humans. Then again, it isn't and has never resembled anything close to human. I would wager every possession I own, it has no similarity to any creature of this dimension. I can't even begin to consider its true form. As I watched, it got infinitely worse. Until Ashley began to move through the air, I hadn't even noticed that he had been airborne, so enthralled I had been by his ravaged body. Slowly, never wavering in speed, Ashley began to recede towards the blurry shape that represented the Jackal. I thought back to the carvings in horror. With every sacrifice it gains form, and so a greater foothold in this dimension. I wanted to rush forward and tear Ashley from the Jackal's thrall, but to come within reach of the creature would mean an unspeakable end. One that I would have already faced had I not wounded it with the psychic supernova. Suddenly, Ashley stopped moving mere meters from the Jackal, and I realized with a shock how the Jackal had previously communicated, through Ashley. Now I know why I recognized that voice, even distorted as it had been. Ashley's mouth opened, and from it roared the Jackal.
You will suffer from using the glow against me. Suffer as he did.
Roared the grotesque Ashley/Jackal hybrid. Evidently, it only knew the light that hurt it so bad as the glow. It didn't matter. The important thing was that it had been hurt, and badly. I probed my mind. No trace of the Jackal's presence remained. Apparently, That part of it, physically manifested in the virulent darkness, had either been destroyed or banished by my mental counterattack. Even if I met my death here, beast, I will do my utmost to bring you with me, I responded bravely. The saturating fear and accompanying thoughts which had so crippled me, both mentally and physically, was gone. Now I could see the Jackal, regardless of how well I comprehended it. Much of that terror that I had felt at the hands of it was gone, just like the virulent darkness. Even the voice was less intimidating now that it had a definitive source. It spoke again.
I have consumed many. This one is the last. I will be free from my prison.
The Jackal bellowed, drawing Ashley towards him. No, I whispered. I sprinted towards them, no matter the cost. Even if it were my life or my sanity, I could not allow the Jackal to consume Ashley and escape whatever prison it was incarcerated in. Such a beast would wreak unimaginable destruction on the surface. I pulled a silver piece of equipment, the last thing I had taken from Ashley's pack, the flare gun. As the Jackal and Ashley came together, I drew and fired. The world exploded around me. End. Cave Children. No author. On November 22nd, a rescue party led by Dr. Marcin and Sierra into the Dolth Aurel caves of Pompeii discovered a damaged tape recorder tied up in a piece of white guideline. In none of the 4 excursions were the missing parties in question found, nor any of their supplies save for the length of the guideline and the tape recorder attached to it. It serves as the only record of the events which the parties in question experienced. 17 entries of substantial length were recorded, as well as several shorter entries that appear to have been recorded by mistake, as no speech is audible for the duration. What follows is a transcript of the audio which appears in those 17 entries. This is Dr. Mason Perry, September 12, 1996. Aircraft over the Pacific Ocean, 4:41 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. In the Dolth Aurel caves of the small Micronesian state of Pompeii, there's a breed of lizard with one of the most remarkable defense mechanisms known amongst the reptiles. It has developed the ability to hurl rocks from the cave floor, where it dwells, with lethal velocity at targets dozens of feet overhead. Nobody is quite sure why it has developed this ability, as the few specimens currently available were found wandering around the outside of their natural cavernous habitats. My colleagues and I are traveling to Pompeii to study the lizard in its natural environment, on the first trip of its kind, to attempt to discover the purpose for which this unique behavior has been adapted. The reason no such expedition has yet been attempted, despite knowledge of the lizard's existence within the scientific community some 60-odd years, are the various local reports of the danger of the caves. The folklore of the indigenous Tanichan people, native to this area for thousands of years, tells the progeny of the earth demon Ban Dolth dwells within the caves, guarding the entrance to the subterranean kingdom. These demon children are said to slay any who attempt to make passage through the caves, which were sealed off until roughly 1,000 years ago, when the heavy rocks which covered the mouths of the cave range were moved to construct ancient buildings by foolish men. Folklore is simply folklore, of course. The Tanichan are not an isolated tribe. They are a perfectly modern people, and seldom take the old myths and legends of their culture as literal fact. However, on 2 separate occasions within the last 70 years, young men have set out into the caves to prove their bravery and return with terrifying tales of having seen creatures exactly like those described in the old legends. They told of large 4-legged animals with pale, translucent skin, characteristic of cave albinism. These creatures had severely arched backs from each of the 4 corners of which they protrude, spindly limbs bisected by single outward-facing joints, and at the bottom tips which were flat feet. They lumbered about like awkward spiders with wriggling left-to-right motions of their bodies, which appeared flexible. They had 2 large immobile protrusions on their back which were thought to conceal wings. though they were never seen to fly. Jutting out from beneath their two front legs was a round head and a single enormous red eye which blinked rapidly. Both young men, having seen them only at a great distance and from safely high above, described them as living in a group of perhaps 30 or 40, consistently murmuring in a low buzz. When this group spotted the young intruders, they suddenly let out a high-pitched shriek, which in both cases frightened off their visitors. The latter young man claims that the initial immobilization with utter terror and was able to summon the strength to run only after they darted towards him with terrifying speed. Because of these sightings, belief in the children of Ban Duluth has persisted amongst the Tanichan, and they refuse to go into the caves. My colleagues and I suspect what the young man believed they experienced was heavily colored by the local legend. However, we appreciate that some sort of large crustacean may live within the caves all the same, and as such has taken certain safety precautions. We have brought binoculars and night vision capabilities so that we can make our observations at a safe distance from any cave life, and without the need for artificial light sources which might alert it to our presence. To the latter end, I am also taking research notes verbally, and with a dictaphone to avoid the need for light by which to write, should our headlamps need to be turned off. Because no guides for the caves exist, we have brought several thousand feet of highly durable cord to mark our paths as we traverse the caves. Each of the four of us also has semi-automatic handguns with 15 rounds. Hopefully we won't have to use these last. This is Dr. Mason Perry, September 14th, 1996. Mouth of Dulth Aural Minor, 3:18 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, plus 11 hours. We are preparing our descent into the Dulth Aural Minor, the smaller of the two largest caves in the Dulth Aural range. We would have preferred to select a cave other than the ones in which the children of Ban Duluth had been purportedly sighted, but this was the one of the only 6 caves in the range that the local Tanichan guides were able to or willing to lead us to. We have suited up with all of our necessary gear for the scientific spelunking adventure, including a 3-day supply of water and food. Our aim is to remain in the caves for a maximum of 18 hours on this trip. If it should happen that we would need more time to find the rock-tail lizard on a single expedition, we will return better prepared for a longer stay. Still, one can never be too cautious. I am joined on this trip by Dr. Jeanette Briggs and William Kincaid. Dr. Marcin and Nada fell ill after ignoring our group's admonitions and sampling a rather exotic local dish upon landing, and so will not be joining us on this initial expedition. A woman's voice can be heard in the background. "He's gonna miss all the fun!" Should it happen that we discover a new species of crustacean within these caves, we will make an informal note of the benefit of our colleagues back in the States. The woman. "Okay, Mason, the lines are tied off. We're ready to go." This is Dr. Mason Perry, September 14th, 1996, inside the Dulth Aural Minor, 4:36 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time plus 11 hours. A periodic echoing clank can be heard in the background. I am currently watching a mature rock-tail lizard specimen lift and sort rocks. When the lizard lifts a rock, he will turn it over several times in his prehensile tail, then set it back where he found it. If he comes upon a flaw in the rock, he tosses it up and out of the way of the cave floor. It seems as though the lizard spends some amount of its spare time making sure that its rock supply is more usable in the event of an emergency. A man's voice, also hushed, can be heard nearby. "Look, Mason, a bat just flew into the ceiling." There's a long silence, then a sudden squeak followed by a thud. "Whoa, did you guys see that? Goodness, that was freaking fast." The lizard picked up a rock and then the bat fell off the ceiling. It happened so fast I didn't even see the throw. The lizard is just currently eating the bat it just killed. You know, Jeanette, we thought that this was a self-defense mechanism, but it looks like it's hunting A series of extremely rapid clanks are heard. "Holy cats, what was that?" The woman breathless. "Goodness, Mason, did you see it? The lizard was trying to hit it. I think it scared it off." Dr. Mason Perry, September 14th, 1996. Inside the Dulth Aural Minor, 4:45 a.m. Dr. Briggs saw one of the children. We now suspect that this is some type of an arachnid, or possibly some sort of insect rather than a crustacean. It was climbing on the ceiling when it appeared. We didn't notice it, but the rock-tailed lizard sure did. It whipped up a series of rocks at it with shocking speed. Dr. Briggs was one of the only 3 of us to follow the trajectory of the rocks quickly enough to catch a glimpse of it. According to Dr. Briggs, it was probably close to 5 feet in total length and perhaps 2 feet high. She didn't get a good look at the crustacean, but she did confirm a single blinking red eye in the center of its head. The woman. I'm not sure about this, Mason. You didn't see what I saw. I don't want to be anywhere near that thing. I say we head back. Dr. Briggs is shook up about the whole thing. Dr. Kincaid and I, however, are anxious to press on. Perhaps it's just because we want to get a good look at these children ourselves. The young men who visited these caves reported that they spent approximately an hour wandering inside them when they discovered the nest. So, given the time spent observing the first rock-tailed lizard specimen, I figured it's maybe 20 minutes more into the cave until we see it. Dr. Kincaid had been trying to assuage Dr. Briggs's fear by noting that we'll be safely high off the ground and, unlike the young men who visited before us, we will be armed. The woman. Stop talking to your dang tape for a second. I'm right here, don't you freaking narrate over me. I want to head back. That thing was so freaking fast, don't you understand? You saw how fast those lizards threw rocks and it got out of the way of all of them. These things are quick when they want to be, Mason. I do not want to be here to find out when they see us. Okay, Jeanette, how about this? Would it make you feel better if we use the night visions from here on in? That way they won't be able to see us, so they've got nothing to worry about. Jeanette, you've seen animals on expeditions that we know can kill humans easily. What's the first thing you learn about those animals? What did you say the whole way here? The woman. That if you leave them alone and stay out of their way, they won't bother you. Exactly. Look, Jeanette, these things are cave spiders, right? Spiders aren't aggressive creatures. If we leave them be and we stay out of their way, they can't even see us, we'll be fine. The woman. I guess. Okay, I'll go, but I want this to go on the record. On the record that you keep recording that I think that this is a mistake. Duly noted. Dr. Mason Perry, September 14th, 1996. Inside the Doth Aral Minor. I think it's about 5:15 a.m., but I don't want to turn on my watch light. We can see them. I don't think that this is the nest that the locals described, though. There are only about 4 of them here. Everything they said about these things is true. The big eye, the spindly legs. I can't speak of its gray skin or the eye's redness, though, through the goggles, but Dr. Briggs confirmed that earlier. I was expecting the wings to be larger, though. The rigid coverings only seem to go about halfway down the back. We are still at a pretty substantial distance, and even with these binoculars, I can't get enough clarity to make out a lot of the details. But I don't see a mouth on these creatures. They have 2 vertical slits just below the eye, it looks like. I think these are nostrils of some kind, which is leading me to doubt that these creatures are any sort of arachnid or insect. And actually, hey Bill, does that look like a tail to you? Where? The one closest to us. Look carefully. It sort of follows the arch of its back, but it's just hanging there. Is that a tail? Yeah, I think it is. Are these things reptiles? I don't think so. The back curves down and the tail follows it. Lizard spines don't arc like that. I think these things are mammals. They look hairless. That's not unheard of subterranean mammals. And it could be short fur, right? I can't tell at this distance. Okay, you've seen them. Can we go now, please? Yeah, we probably should. Marcin is going to want to see these things for himself anyways. Ah, shoot. This is Dr. Mason Perry, September 14th, 5:43 a.m. We've retraced our steps back to the area where we first observed the rock-tailed lizard in action, and something's wrong. We followed the line up ahead about 300 feet and saw that it led us across a shallow pool of water. We could easily cross it, but none of us remember crossing any water. Everything past this point feels extremely unfamiliar to all of us. The woman can be heard sobbing. She then says, "This is what he does. This is what he does." This is how he punishes trespasser. This is what he does. Jeanette is taking it pretty hard. The woman upset and angry. This is what they said. They said that Bandolth imprisons people in these caves. Didn't you listen? This is what he does. He's getting us lost, trying to confuse us, trying to draw us in deeper. His children have seen us. They know that we're here. And we gave them time. We gave them time to retie our lines on a new path that leads us farther into the cave. Try to calm down, Jeanette. No cave demons trying to get us, okay? This is what he does. I wanted to turn back a long time ago. We could have turned back, but you wanted to do your freaking research, and now we're all dead. We're dead, do you understand me? Dead! We're going to follow the lines. Jeanette doesn't want to, but she's more afraid of staying here alone. It's possible that falling rocks or rising water could have changed the terrain and we didn't realize it. If we get to the end of the line and it turns out that something did bite through it, at least we'll know. The way I figure it, it'll be dawn soon. Daylight should be an easy source for us to follow and exit to, if worst comes to worst. What the heck are these things? We've been following the line for about an hour, and about 20 minutes ago we saw 2 or more of them. They were standing rear to rear with their hindquarters touching and lurching back and forthing into each other, grunting and buzzing with their eyes wide open and fixed on nothing. It looked like mating. I know insects will sometimes breed end to end like this, so now I'm doubting my suspicion that they were mammals. I don't believe they saw us, but we've turned off our headlamps just in case. We're currently proceeding with night vision from here on in. This is Mason Perry. Dr. Kinnickade is gone. He slipped off an edge and hit his head before falling. I don't know where he went. I presume he's unconscious. As soon as he fell, Jeanette started running. She says that one of the children grabbed his ankle and dragged him down. I went to go back for him, but she refuses, and I don't have the gear or skill necessary to climb down that edge by myself. We're leaving him, I guess. Hopefully we can get back here in some time and try to save him. Oh no. Dr. Mason Perry, September 14th, 1996, inside the Dolth Oral Minor, 7:27 a.m. Our line was definitely cut. The line led us directly to a ridge above the nest, so I suspect it was a prank by young locals. Naturally, Jeanette insists that it was Bandolth's children trying to punish us. What we saw was grotesque. One of the creatures hung off the wall about 20 feet from the ground with its head facing the ceiling. It gave birth like that. 6 or 7 offspring fell directly down onto the ground. The youngest died on impact, and a few more were killed when several of the adults mauled them. The 3 that survived only did so by viciously slaughtering their attackers. We saw them feasting on one of the slain corpses, and we ran. At this point, we were exhausted, so we set up camp. I'm taking first watch while Jeanette sleeps, if she's able. I killed one. It came up to the camp and I shot it. We were wrong about these animals. They're simians. They look disturbingly human. I suspect a heretofore unknown strain of hominid. They have no eyes. They're totally blind. What we thought was an eye was actually a mouth, opening and shutting. They don't have wings either. It's a ribcage. The creature looks like a human that walks upside down with its stomach pointing upwards. The mouth appears to be on top of its head because of its inversion. What I thought was the tail was actually the animal's genitals. They're extremely skinny and their legs appear substantially longer than ordinary human legs. They lack the much appreciable muscle mass, however, which is odd considering the speed at which they move and their tendency to climb. They have opposable digits on all 4 pedal extremities, though it's apparent that the ones that should be feet are underdeveloped. I suspect the lack of muscle mass is owed to the creature's light weight. There's no way that this thing weighs more than 90 pounds. It's definitely hairless, covered completely in translucent white skin. Jeanette freaked out when she saw it, but she's calmed down considerably since then. In fact, she's calmer now than she has been since she first saw the creature. It could be that she knows what it is now, but I suspect it has more to do with the knowledge that these children can be killed. She agreed to take a second watch and let me catch a few hours of sleep. This is Jeanette Briggs, daughter of Samuel Briggs, human child of the land man god Christ. I now understand my duty. I'm going to return to the nest of the children of Bandol to offer myself as a servant to the earth god. I shall never escape the caves, so I will make myself a new home in Doth Elena, his kingdom beneath the earth. I'm leaving this message for Mason Perry, that he might join me. Crap, Jeanette disappeared. Crap! She left me a message on my machine saying that she went back to the nest. Obviously, she's panicking worse than I realized. I have to go after her. If I don't make it back, whoever finds this, please tell my kids that I love them. And get out. Get out now if you're still in the caves listening to this. Press stop and run. Listen later. Oh no, oh no, oh no. This is Mason Perry. Crap. I don't know what time it is. I think it's, 9:30 maybe? Jeanette is dead. When I got to the nest, Jeanette was standing in the middle of it, taking off her clothes. The children. They watched this. They were in a circle around her just watching, and Jeanette, she bent over backwards like one of them, and they came to her. Oh no. There were two, one on each end of her, and they were violating her. And another came up and tried to get in, but the other between her legs wouldn't stop thrusting and got out of the way. So the third one, it grabbed her by the torso and just started pulling. It ripped off these huge chunks of her skin, of her muscles. She just ripped open, and then they all went for it. And then the two more did this on the other sides, and then more started ripping holes, and pretty soon she was just a pile of wet meat. Oh my gosh. There was nothing left, but they just started eating it. She never screamed. She didn't even make a sound at all. I think that she wanted to die. It's been 2 weeks since I came into these god-forsaken caves. I have long since ran out of food, and my efforts to catch rocktail lizards have netted me nothing but injuries. I've used a first aid kit in my pack to disinfect them and bandage them up as best I could, but I'm concerned about my ability to treat further injuries. I found some water which looks clear enough to supplement my water supply. Hopefully the rocks have done a passable job filtering it. I've seen several children since Jeanette's death, but they don't come near me. I think it's the corpse of one of their own in my campsite that scares them off. I have a theory about the origin of these creatures. I think that they were once a group of early hominids who were trapped in these caves when a rock slide closed the cave mouth. I think they clung to the ceiling as much as possible to stay away from the rock lizards, or perhaps to get the drop on it when they were hungry. I suspect they developed their upside-down hang to give them better visibility of the tiny lizards on the cave floor, and to help them see incoming rocks. Over time, their bodies changed to accommodate this lifestyle. They were a formidable enough predator to walk on the ground again. When outside of the nest, they seemed to come down to the cave floors only to mate. By the time the rocks were finally cleared away from the mouth of the cave, they had become so dependent on the cave's darkness, they never ventured outside again. I'm out of options. I need food. I'm going to eat what meat I can salvage from the carcass at my campsite. Hopefully it'll give me enough strength to, get out of here. I think it's been a week since I ate from that carcass. I didn't get any immediate indigestion or signs of food poisoning, but since yesterday I've felt very ill. Lately I've come to wonder whether Jeanette was right about the children. At first I thought they might be primitive hominids, but I can't explain the guide wire. How could they have been smart enough to cut through it and lead our line to their nest? I don't think it was a prank anymore. I don't think anyone who knew the story of these creatures would attempt to strand another human being to its dark hell. I thought that the children might have cut through the lines out of curiosity and carried it with them as far as they could to their nest. But today, I realized that it had been tied up at our campsite. How could they have known to knot it that way? I think that they were intentionally trying to trick us. Is this the thing the Tanichan call the Band Duluth responsible? Is there some superior intelligence or power guiding these creatures? And does it build its army of the children from the humans it traps in these caves? Are the children of Bandolth ancient hominids or disfigured humans? I can barely separate fact from fantasy in my mind. My watch slipped off my wrist 2 days ago and shattered. I've lost all sense of time in the interim. I'm losing weight too quickly and I expect to die soon. My eyes feel gummy and infected. Yesterday I decided to start a fire to cook some of the carcass. I couldn't risk any further infection and no other food has been available. There was no wood, so I burned some of my clothes. Once I'd eaten all the meat on the carcass, I realized that I had lost the only thing keeping the children away from the camp. I tried keeping the fire going throughout the night in hopes that it would scare them away. I'm naked now, and the fire is gone. I've considered trying to burn anything in this dictaphone that seems flammable, but I've since thought better of it. I'll be tying this recorder to the guideline in hopes that any rescue attempts might find it, though given how long I've waited, I doubt anyone is coming. My back is killing me. The tape ends here. According to the testimony of Dr. Enciera, the rescuers spotted several of the creatures mentioned in the tapes during their second trips into the cave. On their fourth trip, when this tape was found, they opened fire on one which approached their party, scaring it away. They described this last as stoutier than the others, and with what appeared to be bandages wrapped around its arms.